All right, man, peace. So, brothers, two of the most highly contested conversations as we come down to the stretch run of the NBA season is who is going to be the NBA's MVP and who is going to be the NBA's Rookie of the Year. I'm already on record as stating that my MVP is Giannis Antetokounmpo, and I don't think that there's much that James Harden can do from here to steal it in my mind, even though I think that the American mainstream sports media is trying desperately to convince the viewer that James Harden should be the MVP over Giannis Antetokounmpo for whatever reason. I've already stated in other videos that I do believe that the NBA is going to have a very difficult time in its own mind trying to sell a non-American basketball star as the best player in the NBA and as its ambassador. And I think that that dynamic or that phenomenon is playing out in the subconscious minds of many of the members of the American media, especially when that non-American player happens to be a quote-unquote African. I think that it would have been much easier in their subconscious mind to sell a player who was not American as the best player in the NBA if they were Asian or if they were Caucasian. And I do believe that we're going to see that phenomenon play itself out in 5 or 6 years if Luka Doncic is able to improve to the degree where he's recognized or viewed as being the best player in the NBA. I'm not quite sure if that's going to happen, but you never know, because as I've stated, he reminds me of a right-handed James Harden. And I think that if the Mavericks play their cards right, that's how they're going to try to market him. But just to get back to the point, Amin El-Hassan is also going to allege that there is some xenophobia in the NBA, meaning some anti-foreigner sentiment. Do I agree with him? To a degree, yes, I do, because as I've already stated, I think that Giannis Antetokounmpo is on his way to being robbed of an MVP award. He's also going to transmit that argument to the Rookie of the Year conversation between Trae Young and Luka Doncic. I think that that conversation is different and it has different components than the MVP conversation. So, of course, they're going to talk about it. I'm going to chime in.
All right, let's move on. D'Angelo Russell, former Laker, tweeted yesterday, currently Brooklyn net, almost called him New Jersey. Always do that. Here's what he tweeted. Co-MVPs and co-Rookies of the Year. Hashtag it's only right.
I have to say again, I'm very impressed with the season that D'Angelo Russell has had. I'm very impressed with how he's bounced back. I would never have thought or predicted that he was going to have a comeback like he's had. So, salutations to him.
Only right. I mean, is he right? You support this? I mean, it already exists.
Let me say this very quickly. I think that it's relatively shameful that with the season that Giannis Antetokounmpo has had, which is a historic season, and the fact that he's on a team that has the best record in the NBA and made very few roster changes from last season to this season, that this is even a conversation. I don't believe that this is competitive. Now, James Harden is having a historically great offensive season. There's no doubt about that. But I like precedent. Do we have a precedent for a player having an offensive output season like James Harden is having, at least at the wing position, and receiving the MVP award? I don't believe that there is. The closest thing to what many of the NBA beat writers are trying to do with James Harden this season that has been done in the past was when they gave the MVP award to Russell Westbrook in 2017. But at least in 2017, Russell Westbrook truly had a historically great season. He broke through a barrier that no one ever thought was going to be broken again, number one. Number two, the team that had the best record in the NBA, the Golden State Warriors, who won 67 games, had two players on their squad who many argue, quote-unquote, canceled each other out. So at least that was the argument for why Russell Westbrook deserved the MVP award that year. So I had no real problem with it. Back in 2006, Kobe Bryant had a season very similar to James Harden's season this year. He did not win the MVP, nor did he deserve to. In 1987, Michael Jordan averaged 37 points per game. He became the first player to have over 200 steals and over 100 blocks on defense. This is a player who averaged 37 points a game, who also achieved a historical milestone defensively. So he had a historically great season that no other NBA player had had up to that time, at least according to the tallies that were kept at that moment, because we don't know what Will may have done back in the 60s because they were not keeping track of steals and things of that nature. So he probably had over 200 steals and 200 blocks or 300 blocks. Who the hell knows? The point being is that during the modern era, from 1979 onward, Michael Jordan became the first recognized player to have over 200 steals and 100 blocks in the same year that he averaged over 37 points per game, and he did not win the MVP, nor did he deserve to. They gave the award to Magic Johnson because, as I've stated in other videos, the NBA MVP award has always been for the player who, number one, was on the best team in the NBA, and if he was having a transcendent season. Now, if you happen to be a star player who was on the best team in the NBA and you were not having a transcendent season, then you would look around the league to see if there were other players who were having a transcendent season and whose team also was excelling during the regular season. So, for example, Isaiah Thomas in 1989, he was not having a transcendent stat season. His team led the league in wins, but he was not having a transcendent stat season. So they gave the award to Magic Johnson. I just don't see how you can give the award to James Harden this year when you have a player in Giannis who's having a historical season. What Giannis is doing right now has not been done in the history of the NBA other than by Oscar Robertson. And then on top of that, and that's just offensively. Defensively, he's one of the top 1 or 2 players in the NBA depending on the metric. And then on top of that, his team is leading the league in wins. So, I mean, I'm not quite sure how this is becoming so much of a conversation. No disrespect to James Harden.
They make everything public, so it's a little different. It wasn't like that now. So we'll know all the votes. We'll know the whole tally.
Yeah.
It ain't gonna be no secret.
We do remember who voted for who. But you know that now.
But it's not like
And that's
people.
why I don't vote anymore.
But Mark, that's why it's not like there
And
was.
I don't want people making money off of who I pick.
Right.
Yeah, that's a different.
Well, that's
story.
the other
That's
part
a different
too,
story,
right?
Yeah. But my thing is this: it's not like back in the day when Grant Hill and Jason Kidd did it. There was some writer who was like, "I can't choose. I choose them both." No,
Right,
that's
no.
not how it
No,
happened.
it's
some dudes voted Jason Kidd, some dudes voted Grant Hill.
The tally
and when they
tied.
tallied
But you didn't know the number.
Right.
It was tied. Come on. It was really tied. You believe it
you
was
sound
tied?
like the internet.
I agree with you, Mark Spears. I think that Jason Kidd probably won the Rookie of the Year award, but they wanted to push Grant Hill. So they allowed Grant Hill to tie with Jason Kidd. It would not shock me at all.
Internet now, Mark. Was it a
You're a conspiracy theorist about this?
Or maybe it was the other way around, and Grant Hill actually won the Rookie of the Year award, but they wanted to make it the co-Rookie of the Year with him and Jason Kidd, hoping that maybe they could create a pseudo Larry Bird, Magic Johnson rivalry for the 90s. The NBA was very desperate during that time period, so they were trying anything to market some of their young stars.
So there's how many people vote? 100.
Now it's
something?
100. Now it's 100.
And it was tied. Stop.
Because of points.
Just coincidentally was the same number.
It can't happen.
I mean, it's only happened twice.
So why are you saying that it should be co-MVPs or co-Rookies of the Year now?
I ain't saying that. He's saying.
I'm saying I don't support it. Give me a definitive winner.
Nope.
Who would you pick?
MVP Giannis, Rookie of the Year, that race is far closer. That race is far closer. I'd still probably give it to Luka, but that's neck and neck right now.
For what?
For both. And don't give me a tie.
You know what? I need to find.
See?
When I did
That's
vote.
why you don't vote anymore.
No. When I did vote,
I wanna make you vote here.
You could ask Mark Broussard. I waited to the day after the regular season. I look at the whole body of work.
Right.
That's good.
I need to find out what the Rockets' final record is, and then.
Well, that's what you need to do. You need to wait till the very end of the season. But I don't know how the Rockets' final record is going to affect James Harden winning the MVP, especially with only about 6 games left.
And then I can answer that question.
Really?
Yes.
So can you give me a scenario where the Rockets' final record, if it's this, or if they end up finishing in this spot, will Harden get you?
I
Agreed.
think if he pushes up to third in the Western Conference,
That's very likely. That's a very likely
I mean,
thing.
Mark Spears, this is Earth calling. The Rockets are already the 3rd seed.
he makes a strong argument.
You know, for me.
But I mean, this is a tough one. I ain't gonna lie.
I'll let you
No, it's not that tough. It's only tough if you want Harden to win.
do rookie later, but go ahead. Give me the MVP.
Giannis.
Okay.
To me,
Yeah, I'm with him.
to me, it's about the entirety of the year. And Harden, as great as he's played,
In my opinion, the year that Giannis Antetokounmpo is having this season is very reminiscent of the year that Hakeem had in the 1993-94 season.
We're not there yet.
and his peak. What's already happened, even though his peak is higher than anybody else's this year, there was a stretch at the beginning of the year, October, November, chunk of December, where he wasn't playing MVP basketball. So for me, I value the idea that Giannis was MVP from day one to all the way to the end.
All right.
Not only that, but once again, no one is factoring in the defensive aspect. Because when you have that conversation, all of a sudden it becomes far more obvious who the MVP of the league is supposed to be. And there's nothing against James Harden, but it's Giannis, and it's not that close in my view. Now, if the Rockets were leading the league in wins, then it would be neck and neck. Let's say if the Rockets had 59 wins and the Bucks had 57 or 58, then it would be neck and neck.
He hasn't dropped.
Yep. Steady, yep.
We'll get to the Rookie of the Year race in just a second. Mark, we'll ask you if Trae's closing the gap for the Rookie of the Year. That's coming up
You
here.
got an ice tray mask for me?
Yeah.
No, we're doing it now. Let's talk about it now, George.
do it now, then.
I want to talk about it now.
Okay.
Ain't nobody talking about they shouldn't have made that trade no more.
I'm with them. I'm going to use a means logic here. Luka from day one has played the best basketball.
And been
Well, that
special.
will be held against
Let me say this very quickly. I think that the argument for the Rookie of the Year is a bit different. I do agree that Luka Doncic got off to a far faster start than Trae Young, but unlike Giannis, who's kept up the pace for the entire season, Luka has not kept up the pace for the entire season. He got off to a great start, but now he's starting to peter out at the finish. Trae Young got off to a very slow start, and now he's starting to run on all cylinders down the stretch of the season. Giannis has been great all year. James Harden got off to a slow start, and then he became arguably the hottest player in the entire NBA for a 4-month period. So that's the difference in those two conversations.
held against Trae at the beginning.
Special. And my thing is also this. It's two different conversations. Whether Trae Young is going to be a very good or great NBA player is separate from whether he's closed the gap here. So, in the words of Michael Jordan, the ceiling is the roof.
Right.
Right? Okay, so now I'm closer. I'm closer, right?
Yeah.
But I'm not there yet.
Right.
Luka's up there.
And Luka's pop.
No, Luka's not up there. And that's the issue that a lot of NBA players have with the media pundits on television. They're talking about Luka Doncic like he's Steph Curry or like he's James Harden. If he's up there, then what that really means is that his team should have more wins. They should have more victories. Their win total should be up in the 40s if he's the dominant player that you're trying to make him out to be. I think that he's a very good young player who has a lot of things to develop on because he's not a good defender at all. So they're going to need a bunch of athletic 3-and-D guys around him. That's why I state that the paradigm that they're going to have to adhere to make sure that they can maximize his output is the James Harden Houston Rocket paradigm, where you have a bunch of athletic players around him who can guard their man and hit wide open 3-point shots and let him just run the offense and do whatever the hell he wants to do. That's really the model that they're going to have to fashion their team after. But this notion that Luka Doncic is so far and ahead above Trae Young, that's just nonsense. Trae Young's problem right now is that he's trying to play like the wrong player. He's trying to play like Steph Curry, and he should be trying to play like Steve Nash, because Trae Young's best asset is his passing, not his shooting right now. He's a good shooter, but he takes bad shots. If he learns to bring those shot attempts down and only take shots that he can make, as opposed to a lot of those wild shots that he takes, and utilize his passing ability more, his team is going to become much better. He's going to become far more proficient and a far greater contributor to his team. And he's shown the talent to dominate games already. But this notion that there's this huge gap between Doncic and Trae Young, that's nonsense. And that's the reason why the NBA players are turning against Luka Doncic, because they've been hearing about this guy for the last year or so. And let's be for real, the elephant in the room is that the reason why they're hearing about him so much is because he's a Caucasian player who's very good at what he does. And I've been saying over the course of this NBA season that there have been other rookies who've been playing very well. DeAndre Ayton has been playing very well, but he gets no shine whatsoever. And we know that he's on a very bad team. But it's not like Luka Doncic is on a good team. He's on a very bad team also.
Popular.
It ain't a popularity.
Whoa,
It's
whoa, whoa,
not. I don't want. It's not a popularity contest.
This dude out the gate
I'll take
was
with
getting
the ball.
so much love.
I'll take
And
with
he
the
was
deservedly
balling.
so.
Thank you, Mark Spears.
No, Trae started getting hot. Ayton had
Trae
some
got
big
hot
numbers
in like
early.
January, right?
I'll take
And nobody
I'll
else
take
was.
the
You
season
guys just
better.
act like now that Trae all of a sudden started killing. He's been killing for months.
Right. But the first 2.5 months of the season,
That's all you talked about was DONCIC. It's like these other dudes didn't exist.
because they
Agreed.
weren't
They
playing
didn't
that
play
well.
that well.
True.
Mark,
First, look at Trae in December. He was balling in December.
wasn't balling this December.
Ayton was averaging like 18 and 10 in December.
Absolutely. Ayton has been averaging 18 and 10 for the entire season.
Other rookies were doing something
Look,
too.
let me
he
tell you
was the
something.
prettiest one.
Let me tell you
He
something.
is pretty.
If you want to talk about a popularity contest,
He was.
you got to look at
I'm not
all-
saying he's not nice.
No, I'm
His
just
numbers
saying.
not nice.
If you want to
But
talk
others had
about
numbers too.
if we want to talk about a popularity contest, there's no bigger popularity contest than all the NBA players are tweeting Trae Young Rookie of the Year every time he sneezes.
I noticed that as well. But we also have to analyze the reason why they're doing that. The reason why they're doing that is as a counter reaction to what they see from so many of the NBA sports writers who've been trying to push Luka Doncic even before the season started. And they're saying to themselves, this guy is good, but he's nowhere near as good as the media is trying to make him out to be. And they don't respect you guys' opinion, especially if they feel like you have an agenda. That agenda being to market a Caucasian European player as being the soon-to-be best player in the league. It has reflections back to the Jeremy Lin issue that occurred back in 2012, when the NBA was trying to make him out to be better than Magic Johnson.
Like, that's the popularity.
So then why are they hating on DONCIC then?
Who, the players?
Yeah.
Because there's a level of xenophobia in the NBA.
I partially agree with that. But when it comes to DONCIC, I think that they're annoyed by how he's been depicted by the media as the best player in the league. There were people on television trying to campaign for Luka Doncic to be a part of the All-Star game. Why is that? He did not deserve to be an All-Star.
It's true. If you're from somewhere else, man, I think Giannis is feeling a little bit.
I definitely agree with that one. I believe that Giannis is feeling the xenophobia far more than Luka Doncic. Because as I've already stated, I don't think that the NBA has ever had a problem marketing their best player as someone who's a foreigner, as long as he's a European or an Asian. I do think that they've had an issue marketing their best player as someone who's a foreigner if they were African. That's the issue that the NBA has always had. They had it with Hakeem, and I think that they're having it right now with Giannis, and they'll have it with Joel Embiid as well. And a lot of it is subconscious, because I noticed it in the conversation. Stephen A. Smith trying to campaign for James Harden, some of the things that he's saying are so disingenuous, and that's normally the touchstone of when you know that someone has an agenda, is when they start to say things that are disingenuous, that you know and they know are not true. And one of the main things that I've heard him saying about James Harden in his attempt to try to push him above Giannis is that what James Harden has been doing the last 2 seasons has nothing to do with Mike D'Antoni. Stephen A. Smith has tried to prove, for whatever reason, that James Harden has been doing what he's doing offensively since he's been in Houston, and that's just not the case. He's had the same moves since he's been in Houston, but he's not had the same output. Mike D'Antoni has taken, or the Mike D'Antoni system has taken James Harden from a very good to great offensive player to someone who's now historically great. And there's a big difference. You have great offensive players like a Paul Pierce or a Vince Carter. And then you have historically great offensive players like Kobe or Kevin Durant or Michael Jordan or Elgin Baylor. What the Mike D'Antoni system has done is it's taken James Harden from a great offensive player to a historically great offensive player. And the reason why I bring that up is because Stephen A. Smith is trying to neglect the effect of the D'Antoni system, while also trying to claim that the reason why Giannis is playing so well is due to Budenholzer. And that's just not the case. You can't. Giannis basically did very similar things last season. What Budenholzer has done is he's improved the overall synergy of the team so that they've caught up with Giannis.
How many guys are going, Harden? It's because he got a funny name. You got a funny name. Sometimes it just doesn't click with people.
I think that there's an element of truth to that, especially with Giannis. Luka Doncic, no, I'm not buying that.
You don't agree with that?
I see it all the time. To me, I see it all the time.
So they're saying because he's from Greek and Africa, I'm not going to vote for him.
I feel like people...
I think that there's a subconscious element to that, especially because Giannis is not someone who the media can count on for a storyline. See, what the media loves, because they know that the so-called black American man tends to have a certain vibe and energy around him. They like when he's the center of attention because they can count on him for a witty quote or a controversial stance or some type of wild tweet or what have you. With Giannis, it basically is what it is. He's a very regular character. He's not someone like a Russell Westbrook who's going to go back and forth with the media or with the fans. He's not a LeBron James who's going to put out all type of wild tweets and so on and so forth. So the media is having trouble in their subconscious mind trying to figure out what they're going to do over the next 6 or 7 years if this guy Giannis Antetokounmpo is the best player in the league. They'd rather it be a so-called black American because, once again, they know the type of drama that can come along with the black American man being the best player in your league, as well as the dominance and the magnificence and the charisma, etc.
Relate better to James Harden, so they vote for James Harden.
He's not kissing everybody's tail, maybe as others do.
Who, Giannis?
Yeah.
No, he doesn't.
Maybe that. I don't know.
Neither is Luka.
All right, let's move on.
Luka don't need to kiss anybody's backside. The media kisses his backside. But anyway, peace.